Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another episode of New Hampshire Latino News Opinion Plus. This is a space for our opinions, where we talk about current events and questions that Latino communities are curious about. Today, we are joined by Denis Goulet, Commissioner and CIO of the New Hampshire Department of Information Technology. Welcome, Denis. Thank you for joining us this week.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity to be able to speak to you folks once again.
Absolutely. How are you doing today, and how's everything in New Hampshire?
Well, I'm doing really well. We're super busy. We got so much stuff going on that it's a high level of activity at all times in my department, and I think throughout state government right now. It's pretty exciting time. Faced a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities.
Absolutely. So we'll jump on in, and we just would like to start off by asking, how has the impact of information technology, how has it changed over the last several months and even years with the pandemic and many other social challenges in New Hampshire?
Well, the pandemic did change a lot of how I think average folks or everybody views technology in state government, because really what happened during COVID was that there was a very rapid shift to dependent on less in-person delivery of service, and so that's challenged us in a lot of ways. It's in some ways the way we think about things, right? How do we approach our citizen service mission? But also, how important are these like mundane things like networks and having them work correctly every day, every minute of the day, so that we are delivering on our citizen service mission in a quality way, in a timely way. So I think, to me, that's the biggest change, is that, that understanding of in state government of the importance of IT infrastructure for delivering on our mission, and the pivot or the shift towards, the online digital government services versus, in-person services for all things.
That's very interesting. So can you explain more on just what are kind of the biggest challenges that you're currently facing in terms of cybersecurity? Or a better question is, just going off of that response, you mentioned that you had to change between in-person services versus virtual or on phone call services. Can you explain more on how often did you have to serve people in person versus virtual or over the phone?
Well, I mean, certainly in the early COVID response days, there was very few things were in person, and so we had to, we would look at, you always want to have a phone option, but our, the most efficient option was to be able to have a quality online option for citizens that are comfortable with doing that. So we always had the combination of a call center operating for a particular service, like just thinking about vaccine signups, for example, or testing signups. You could sign up via a phone call, a call center, or you could sign up online. And we were hoping that more people would sign up online because it was a lot easier to deliver on that service. But some people aren't comfortable with that, so there was still, lots of folks doing phone calls as well. And of course, if the online experience didn't work well for them, then they would call, which wasn't good either. So we had to make sure that we, to the best of our abilities, that the online service was high quality.
No, absolutely. Like those are all very reasonable, just like configurations, and I think every company and every group of people have faced those same issues. So I guess going off of specifically with with your department, can you explain more on the biggest challenges that you've been currently facing in terms of cybersecurity at the moment, and how have you been addressing those issues with cybersecurity?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to COVID a little bit. During the early COVID response activities, a lot of the bad actors in the cyberspace, for a very brief period of time, kind of slowed down their activities. I think it might have been a goodwill gesture or whatever, but that didn't last very long, and then it started being that some of the bad actors were using COVID motivations to entice people to do things, whether it was giving up their credentials so that they're, so say, examples would be people giving up their credentials so that a bad actor could change where their direct deposit checks were going for unemployment, for example. That was a common thing that happened during COVID throughout the country. So that was an example where, it was looking at the activities that are going on inside COVID to motivate people to help these criminals. And the other thing we saw is extremely high level of activities beyond what we had normally experienced from the normal sources like foreign governments and nation state governments who are probing our systems from outside the United States. That very high level of that. So that's a big challenge. But the biggest two challenges we're seeing overall right now are what we call ransomware, which you see almost every day, particularly in a city and town governments, because they're less equipped to handle it. They're considered by the criminals to be softer targets, so they've been targeted a lot in that for ransomware, and also for what we call business email compromise, which is really using email communication vehicle to create a scenario where they're able to steal money, whether it's redirecting funds or changing of direct deposit accounts in key areas so that the money can be stolen. So those are the big things we see. And, our enemies and the criminals keep adapting very quickly. So we have to continue to adapt almost continuously to new methods of approach to us. So that's a pretty big challenge. It's something we deal with almost on a daily basis.
No, thank you so much for that. And so, I wanted to clarify, as a follow-up question, do you think that there are more domestic cyber attacks than there are foreign attacks? And for what reason? What are the most common reasons that you receive these type of, cyber attacks, or that cyber attacks tend to become more prevalent?
Well, it's definitely foreign actors are the vast majority of all of the things we're responding to, because it's criminal activity, particularly on the overtly criminal activities. You definitely want to be able to do it from outside the U.S. so that we can't find and prosecute. So that's when you're seeing these particularly where money's involved, where money is extorted through ransomware, successful ransomware attacks, or business email compromises. We believe that's mostly being originated outside of the U.S. And I think that's mostly for practical reasons, right? Our law enforcement cannot get to them directly.
Absolutely. That's really interesting that you mentioned that. So, going off of the issues of cybersecurity, can you explain more on how does the work that you do with cybersecurity, how does that impact underserved communities and communities of color, as they tend to maybe have less accessibility to information technology and to connections and to connections to Wi-Fi? Can you explain more on how have you been impacting those type of communities?
Well, it's a great question, because one of the things we've been working on and encouraging is through our partners at the New Hampshire Municipal Association and our partnership with New Hampshire Homeland Security Emergency Management, as well as the private sector entities who are responsible for ensuring our towns and cities, our local governments in New Hampshire, is trying to work and collaborate and seek funding to enhance the cyber posture of these entities, these non-state entities, but still government entities, so that so all of us together are doing a better job of protecting citizen data, which would include all communities, including underserved communities, as well as the continuity of government. So if there are, if we allow certain areas of service to be compromised by a ransomware attack, then that will affect disproportionately impact the underserved communities, because they're the ones that are often accessing these services. So it's really important, I think, that we keep these services up and running. For example, if we had a successful ransomware attack on our integrated eligibility system in the state, that would affect the underserved communities throughout the state until we had it back working again and their ability to access the benefits. So it's a real, I think continuity of government in that space is a real big deal, particularly for underserved communities.
That's very interesting. So explain, or do you think that the issues of the impact of underserved communities reaching out to your services and how, let's say, a ransom attack occurs and that impacts underserved communities, do you think that's a very universal issue that exists within the United States, or is this very unique to New Hampshire?
Well, it's in the interest of the criminals to ransom the most impactful system possible. So the prize would have been, for example, early in COVID, ransoming a unemployment system would have been a big prize, right, for it, and would have motivated whoever got ransomed to pay the ransom, which is what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to extort money out of you to, they'll encrypt your important data and then ask for money to decrypt it so you can start running the system again. So I think there's a strong motivation among the criminals who are doing this to have it be as impactful as possible, so that they can extort the money. So that's likely, that motivation on the criminal side has a potential for high impact on underserved community side, I think.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So like just going off of just like this knowledge and educating others on just what is going on in cybersecurity, can you explain more on what moves and what actions have you taken in order to engage with the community in the hopes that they will continue the mission of the New Hampshire Department of Information and Technology?
Well, we've done a few things. One is to try to build community, because everything starts, a quote that I like to use is, there's no I in cyber. And it really is a team sport, protecting citizen data, protecting continuity of government. And so collaborating with our peers around the state is one of my biggest priorities. And that starts, with building coalitions, building groups that know each other, sharing information. So we've had a cyber summit, for example, with as many local communities as wanted to participate. I have aggressively sought federal grant funding. In fact, I have in hand some federal grant funding that will allow us to reach out and work with other partners like the Municipal Association and private sector partners to enhance the cyber posture of all of our communities in New Hampshire through leveraging those investments. And the infrastructure bill has about $12.4 million earmarked for New Hampshire in the cyberspace, 80% of which is targeted at local communities. So, there's a potential for some impact there, where if we smartly invest that money in our state, cities and towns and local governments, I think we can raise the bar on cyber posture in that way as well. But that money isn't released yet, but that's coming in the future.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for that response. And just a follow-up question is what do you think? Do you think that the current administration or the current legislation leaders within New Hampshire impacts the work that you do?
Well, I think they've been very supportive of our efforts to raise our cyber posture, both in the state government as well as locally. Every time I go to them and I ask for help on legislation, I found them very supportive. And on the federal level as well, because they're seeing their communities affected by ransomware and business email compromise. So it's become real for our state and federal legislators.
Thank you so much for that. And our last question is, what would you like our audience to know before we depart, or how to engage in the mission of the organization?
Well, I mean, we're a citizen service organization, even though we deal with technology, and so we love to hear feedback, whether we're doing well or not. And I'd say we talked a lot about cybersecurity. So think about, don't be a victim yourself. There's ways to learn on how to not be a victim, and it's pretty simple. There's lots of resources online. The biggest thing I would say to everybody, your audience, is if somebody's coming to you with an urgent request, it is a decent chance that it's not legitimate, because the creating urgency is the very first thing a scammer will do. So watch out for the creation of urgency, and you will be much better positioned to avoid having you be a victim of cybercrime.
All right. Thank you so much for talking with us, Denis Goulet, and for being our guest on New Hampshire Latino News Opinion Plus.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you all take care.
And join us next time for another episode. For more information about our discussion today, check out our web story on NewHampshireLatinoNews.com. Follow us on Twitter at NH Latino News, and our Instagram at NH_Latino News. I'm Brian Zapata with New Hampshire Latino News Opinion Plus. See you next time.